And so as we begin the book of Judges, I want to tell you real quickly that Judges doesn't mean what we think it means. It doesn't mean making decisions or discernment or wisdom or anything like that. It means judges in the sense of like vindicators, someone that is exacting justice. And so these judges are people that judge the other nations for their treatment of the Israelites and then save the Israelites from really themselves, but it looks as if they're saving them from that other nation. And so this first chapter tells us, their history and kind of how they got there. The second chapter is what we're going to focus on today. And then beginning next week, we'll just start going through the judges. So this first chapter talks about the things that happened after Joshua died. And we know that when Moses died, he made Joshua his successor, but Joshua made no one his successor. And the presumption is that they're going to have more local governments now because he's given them each their own allotted land. Each tribe has their own land. And so they're going to kind of govern more locally. They don't have someone leading them into the promised land, leading them into war. And so they're going to govern more locally. And when Joshua gave them this land, he said, yeah, there are still some people left to conquer in the land. That is true. But we don't need this huge army anymore. You can do this by yourselves in your own territories. You can get another tribe to help you, but we're not going to do this big thing anymore. Everybody's going to go to their own places. But he told them, when you go to your own land, don't forget to follow God's laws. Make sure that you remember all the things that God has taught you, because I'm about to die and you're about to go to your own places, and I need you to follow God's ways. And also, they were supposed to get all of the foreigners from their land. It's not like they were just going to go there and live. They were supposed to continue to fight until they rid the people totally of their land. And God said he would help them. God is going to help them do this, but they just need to keep asking him for help. Keep working at it. Keep fighting until all the people are gone. That was their charge. And so after Joshua died, the people go to presumably the priests and say, ask God who's supposed to fight first, how this is supposed to go. And we believe they probably cast lots, and the lot fell on Judah. And so Judah was going to go fight the people first. And remember that Judah got the whole southern part of Israel, except for Simeon got some land within his land. And so Judah's land surrounds Simeon. And so basically they have the whole southern portion of Israel. And so he asked Simeon, because Simeon's land is kind of his land, their land is together. He says, hey, will you come and fight with me? And so they begin this fight for eradicating the people from their land. And so I want to read you, I'm not going to read you at all of chapter 1, but I want to read you a couple of verses that talk about their very first fight, because it's actually kind of funny. It's pretty entertaining, and it's a detail that we don't have before. So this is Judges 1 verse 4. Then Judah went up, and the Lord delivered the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand. They killed 10,000 men in Bezek. They found Adonai-Bezek in Bezek, and they fought against him. Now, Adonai just means Lord or ruler. And so this is the king of Bezek. So I'm going to read it like king of Bezek every time they say Adonai-Bezek. And so they defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And then the king of Bezek fled, and they pursued him, and they caught him, and they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. And then the king of Bezek said, after they did this to him, he said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to gather scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has repaid me. And then they brought him to Jerusalem, and there he died. And so this is just kind of hilarious. Either all the kings did this at this time, or at least he had done this to all of the kings that he had defeated. He cut their thumbs and their big toes off, because this made them no longer to be warriors. They could no longer fight him or anyone else, because they can't wield a sword with no thumbs, and they can't run with no big toes. They can't stand stable on their feet. And so this debilitates them as a warrior. It also shows that they are defeated. This is a visible sign of their defeat. Everyone that sees them knows, oh, they've been defeated by someone. They lost a war because their thumbs and their big toes are gone. And so even he says, I kind of deserve this. This is what I do to other people. And now God is repaying me. He even counts God as his person that is repaying him. So he realizes that the Israelites were acting on behalf of God, and that this is kind of what he deserves. And so it's sort of crazy. Also, this shame would normally be carried because everyone would see that you've been defeated, but he doesn't carry this shame very long, because they carry him off to Jerusalem and then he dies there of these wounds. So, a strange turn of events there. That's their first battle that we get to hear about. Then they just go on. They go on to telling us what all of the next battles are. And so it says the next thing they do is go to Jerusalem, and they fight against the people in Jerusalem. They defeat them, and then they burn that city. That's what this next verse says. But later on in the chapter, it tells us that Benjamin, who also shares Jerusalem with Judah, so Judah has the southern part and Benjamin has the northern part. And so it tells us that Benjamin does not defeat the Jebusites that live there. And so he lives amongst the Jebusites in his territory, but presumably the people are defeated in the southern part, because we know that Judah burned that part of the city. Now, someone could have moved to it later, but that is what we know from this chapter. Then the next thing that we learn is it just kind of reiterates the land of Hebron and Debir, where Caleb defeats the 3 kings of Hebron. And so I guess it's just saying, Judah is defeating all of these people. And remember, Caleb already defeated some of the people in Hebron and Debir. And so it just goes through that list again. And we're not going to go through that because that was in Joshua 15 if you want to go look that up. But we talked about it already. The next thing that we learned, though, is something that we didn't know and haven't heard about since Numbers. And it was only a small little passage. In Numbers, Moses tells his father-in-law and their family, he says, hey, don't go back to your land. Stay with us. God's about to give us this great land, and I'd like you to come with us. And they're like, no, really, we just need to go back home. And then Moses says, no, I really want you to stay. These people have been in Egypt all of this time. They don't know any land other than Egypt. You know this land. You've traveled it, and we would like you to come and help us. Plus, again, God is going to give us great things, and we want you to be a benefit of it. These are his in-laws, Moses' in-laws. Well, now, here in verse 16 of Judges 1, we find out that Moses' in-laws did stay with him, and they've moved in to the land of Judah. And first of all, they're his family members, his by marriage, because this is his wife's family. But also, we think that these people descended from Abraham's wife, Keturah. And so these would be Abraham's family, if that were to be the case, if this is correct that they descended from these people. But either way, God has made provisions for people that are foreigners to live with them as long as they adopt the Israelites' ways and vow to worship their God. And so they get to live there. They're not eradicated as foreigners. They've been adopted into the Israelite family. And so they're living there with Judah. The next thing we find out is that they are fighting the Philistines, the coastal people on the Mediterranean coast. And it says that Judah defeated 3 of the 5 Philistine kings. And it says, but they weren't able to defeat all of them because they had iron chariots. And it's not really that they couldn't defeat them. God had promised to help them defeat all of the people and bring them all out of the land. But they didn't stick with it long enough. They're like, these chariots are fast. They get around on these plains. We don't have this equipment. We fought these 3 kings. This is hard. And we're kind of done. And so they let them remain. And we find out in chapter 2 that all of the Philistine kings have their own land back. So they don't even keep these 3 areas for very long. But it tells us that they defeated those places. They defeated all of the people in the hill country, it says, and just not all of the people in the lowlands. And then the rest of the chapter goes through each tribe and tells how each tribe defeated a lot of the people, but the towns, the specific areas where they allowed the nations to continue to live. And some of these people didn't defeat them initially, but when they got stronger, they submitted to them to forced labor. And then someone like Asher never defeats the people, and they never submit them to forced labor. And then also the land of Dan, which we already knew, the Amorites basically just run them out. Joshua gives them this land, but they never defeat the Amorites that are living there. And so eventually they just give up and they go up to the north and they take land in Manasseh's land and they name it by the tribe of Dan. And so that's just all that it tells us there in chapter 1.